Okay, good morning, everyone. I would now like to invite you all to stand for the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, as well to remain standing afterward for the invocation. Please remain standing for the invocation.
Let's pray. God, we thank you for bringing us all here today safely. We pray for the two schools that are still on their way. We pray that you'll bring them quickly and safely. We thank you for everyone who is here, for all the students who have prepared so hard and diligently, and for their teachers and coaches who've guided them. We pray that they will do their very best, that they will be able to present what is necessary, and that they will be satisfied with their performance. And we pray that the proceedings of today will go well. Bless us all, we pray. Amen.
So, to the management and staff of the Land Settlement Agency, other invited guests, young, enthusiastic students, teachers, parents, judges, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Land Settlement Agency's National Secondary Schools Debate 2023. Before we begin, I would like to congratulate all the schools represented here today. You are already winners, as you would have beaten out the other 12 to 15 schools that competed in the preliminary quiz stage of this competition. So you would have earned the right to debate here today in the quarterfinal stage of the competition. So for that, I wish you congratulations. And I think that deserves a round of applause. So to ensure that we are all aware of the rules and the format of today's debates, I'll now provide you with some insight. For the debate, one team represents the proposition side, of course. The job of the proposition is to present a case in favor of the topic presented. The first proposition speaker has 6 minutes on the floor to make his or her presentation. The speaker must define the motion and present justification. The speaker must briefly outline the case that the proposition team will put forward and explain which speaker will deal with which points. Then he or she should develop his or her own arguments and conclude with a short summary of the main issues. Any team member can present this argument. The first opposition speaker also has 6 minutes for his or her presentation. This speaker must respond to the definition and challenge. The speaker must rebut the arguments of the proposition team and explain why there is a difference between the two sides. The speaker should outline the structure of the opposition team's case and must begin to develop their viewpoint with arguments and proof. Any team member can present this argument. Each side has 5 minutes to make their presentation after the first argument and second arguments are heard, with the proposition team speaker going first. The speakers should spend their time by rebutting points made by their opponents and continuing with their side of the argument. The second team member presents this argument. Finally, we will have summary speakers. Let's pause while we have one. I believe this is presentation. Am I correct? Is where? St. Mary's. Oh, okay. All right. My apologies. All right. So just a brief recap. The first presentations will be 6 minutes long. The second presentations, 5 minutes long. And to end it off, we'll have two summary speakers. And the opposition speaker has the opportunity to give his or her presentation first in this stage of the debate. Each summary speaker has 3 minutes to make their presentation. Either a speaker or the substitute may make the summary presentation. So now that we're all aware of the rules, I would now like to introduce our judges, who are all senior staff at the LSA, who are all very intimately acquainted with the subject matters being debated today. And our first judge is Dr. Keron Victor. He's a senior research specialist. Our second judge, Ms. Crystal Lewis, legal officer. And our third judge, Mr. Kelly Charles, project manager. Again, all seasoned members of staff at the Land Settlement Agency, so they're all in a very good position to assess your arguments here today. Our debate moderator is Ms. Jasmine Benjamin, and our timekeeper, Ms. Nicole Nightingale. Debaters, I would urge you to pay close attention to our timekeeper. She will be positioned, well, not directly in front of you, but in your line of sight, and will hold up a 2-minute warning sign to indicate when you have 2 minutes remaining on the floor at the lectern. She will sound a bell when your speaking time has expired, at which point you must yield the floor. So the 2-minute sign will go up when you have 2 minutes left, and once you hear the bell, that's it. You must yield the floor to your opposition or to the debate moderator. The first debate of the quarterfinals will be between Corpus Christi College and Bishop's Anstey High School, Tobago. So I would now like to ask the representatives of both schools to join me on the stage and take their seats at their respective tables. The affirmative on this side, the opposition on this side. So Corpus Christi will be on this side. Tobago, you'll join me to my left. The resolution being debated today is, be it resolved that squatters should have a right to access basic amenities, example, water and electricity, without tenure. Arguing the affirmative and representing Corpus Christi College are first speaker Kemsha Cornelius, second speaker Radisha Rodriguez, and alternate or investigator, as you all identified her, Daniela Delandro. So give Corpus Christi College a round of applause. Arguing in the negative and representing Bishop's Anstey High School, Tobago. Bishop's High School, my apologies. Bishop's High School, Tobago. I hope I don't butcher this name. Suhaila Makul. Sohaila Makul. Correct, nice. Clavier Simpson. Clavia Simpson, these fancy names. And Tishon Joseph. That one I get right? Oh gosh. Tishon Joseph. All right? So give Bishop's High School, Tobago a round of applause. So in the interest of fairness, we'll ask the students not currently engaged in the debates to hold on in a couple waiting rooms that we have downstairs. You'll be guided by members of staff from the LSA as to where you'll hold on. So for now, we will just have representatives from the schools and any audience members remaining upstairs in the auditorium. So I'll now turn you over to our moderator, Ms. Benjamin, to conduct the first debate. Good luck to all the students, young debaters. I wish you the best of luck.
Good morning, teachers and parents from schools that are not currently debating. If you choose to remain upstairs, you cannot communicate with the students before they go on stage, right? So if you choose to remain upstairs, you have to stay here until they're on stage, right? So we will now have our first proposition speaker.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, judges, timekeeper, audience, and worthy yet misguided opponents. I am Kemshaw Cornelius, representing Corpus Christi College. Today, we are for the motion, be it reserved, squatters should have a right to access basic amenities without tenure. Before I begin, let me define some key terms. Squatter, a person who is in actual occupation of state land without probable claim or pretense of title thereto. Amenities, things considered to be essential to make life easier. Tenure, rules and arrangements to be essential to make life easier. I am beginning by focusing on the human rights perspective. Don't you think access to basic needs such as water, food, shelter, clothing is a fundamental human right? Obviously, and I will make sure to say that this is not an argument I made up, as my fellow opponents should know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a topic we should have been taught about in social studies, which states the basic needs of humans are water, food, shelter, and clothing. So it is very incredulous that we have to come here to debate whether or not humans deserve such basic amenities when it has been proven to be essential to life. It is important that we provide basic amenities to squatters without requiring tenure, ensuring that those even in informal settlements and temporary settlements can enjoy services and enjoy life like any person should. Secondly, to ensure all persons have access to basic amenities is poverty alleviation. Many squatters are marginalized individuals facing economic hardship. Granting them access to basic amenities without strict tenure requirements can be a step towards poverty alleviation. There are various housing programs worldwide aiming to improve living conditions for marginalized individuals. In Brazil, there is a program called the Bolsa Familia program, aiming to provide low-income families with regular school attendance for children and regular healthcare checkups for children. So why can't our government do the same? Nobody, absolutely nobody intends to go through poverty. Lack of access to basic amenities perpetuates the cycle of poverty, and providing these services can contribute to breaking such cycle. Further to this, ensuring squatters have basic amenities without tenure contributes to community stability. Access to basic amenities such as water, food, shelter, clothing, electricity promotes stability within squatter communities. When people have access to these amenities, it helps keep diseases away and makes the community healthier. Taking care of basic needs like water and electricity helps a community to grow. When residents see improvements within their community, they may try to work together to lead to a better community spaces and shared areas. Having good lighting as well makes the neighborhood safer by reducing crime and helping people feel secure, especially at night. Instead of our government focusing on how many illegal structures they can find, They should be creating housing programs for marginalized individuals so that they can have access to electricity without worrying about their safety. Access to basic needs inspire community members to start businesses, improving everyone's lives. Lastly, helping squatters have essential resources without requiring tenure can bring stability to a community, reducing conflicts and creating a positive environment for everyone. At this time, with everything that I have said, no one in this room, especially my misdirected opponents, could tell me that squatters should not have a right to access basic amenities without tenure, because allowing humans to access amenities not only upholds fundamental human rights, but also contributes to poverty alleviation, community stability, and social stability. So my opponents can proceed to present that denying humans access to essential resources is the most reasonable solution. Thank you, everyone, for the courtesy of your attention.
Thank you, and we would like to call the first speaker from the opposition, Ms. Maku.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, my respected opponents, good morning. Now, my opponents on the other side, they believe that granting these basic amenities such as electricity and water would be the most ideal solution to a very serious issue in Trinidad and Tobago. However, this is not the case. They argue that human rights, it's always human rights, and we sympathize with it, but law is law. We cannot have a big crime and a small crime. We cannot ignore and justify the illegality of their stay. The government has other means of providing for them. They have programs such as the AHDC. They have grants and subsidies and many more in place for them. There are other ways to give them these amenities and take care of their human rights without breaking the law. They also believe that it alleviates poverty. But how does it solve poverty? Rather, it gives them more bills to pay. They also argue that it gives community stability. But how is that so? As I continue, my team, we have done the research, and we have seen that rather, it would be nonsensical to ignore the legal framework, the property rights, and the use of public resources. By normalizing squatting, it contributes to the rise in crime rate. And we all know in Trinidad and Tobago that is at an astronomical height already. Why are we encouraging it? Is it that we are now rewarding criminal acts? We would just be encouraging more squatting. Granting these amenities also risks normalizing unauthorized property occupation. It risks undermining the legal fabric of our society. Our society, we have laws in place to ensure a stable community. So why would we now tell people that it is okay to break the law? Access to these amenities may unintentionally legitimize the illegal occupation. Let us say someone earns their money legally, they buy their land, they go to a foreign country for a period of time, and then when they get back, they see that their land is no longer theirs. Who is that fair to? It shows that property rights can be ignored without repercussions. It weakens our legal system legitimacy because people would see, hey, I ain't getting in trouble for it, so why not? We don't do certain things because we know that they are cause and effect. So when we see that there is no effect, no consequence, no repercussion, there is no problem in doing it. Therefore, there would be even more persons squatting. The personal tax income in Trinidad and Tobago stands at 25%. Redirecting public resources risk insufficient use and possible misuse of taxpayers' hard-earned, honest money. The funds that could be used to improve education, healthcare, and of course, infrastructure. There are already assistance programs and shelters for those in need. With companies such as the HEC, which I mentioned earlier, people always argue that the HEC is corrupt and they don't do what they are supposed to. But why not take these resources and the time to improve these facilities, improve these structures, rather than comforting crime? We must address the core issues of homelessness and provide long-term solutions for these issues. As I conclude, I must add, we need to take in consideration of all of these issues and find an honest way. We must add dignity and legality to our society. We must ensure that there's a bright future where dignity stands resilient. And for this reason, we say no to this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now call the second speaker from the proposition team.
Pleasant day, everyone. My name is Judisha, all protocols observed. My name is Judisha Rodriguez, representing for the motion, be it resolved that squatters should have a right to access basic amenities without tenure. As regards to what my opponent would have said, we could tell that they are inconsiderate of others. Right. These people are out here fighting for their lives, and this is what my opponent would have said. Right. I would further our argument by talking about the economic integration. When we provide these marginalized squatters with the basic needs shown at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they will be able to contribute to our local economic development. We are not encouraging people to squat. However, squatters experience circumstances beyond their control, which will leave them to no other alternative. Equality is important when it comes to squatters. Just because they are squatters, it does not mean that they are not entitled to water. They are humans just like us. And when we provide them with these amenities, they will be able to produce an income utilizing skills in agriculture, food services, and fashion design. Imagine, these days people are so cold-hearted to the point where we have to debate whether or not squatters have a right to access these amenities. Another salient point is the public health impact. Without these basic needs, squatters will not be able to have proper waste disposal or hygiene rituals. Amenity access not only benefits the squatters, but broader communities by mitigating health risk. Denying squatters these basic needs can cause typhoid fever and cholera. Do we really want to have another nationwide health care because of the fact that they don't have a right to access these amenities? This will have a burden on the healthcare providers, since now they will have to look after not only squatters, but also people of the broader community. This issue of squatters intersects with social equity concerns. Squatter communities are vulnerable populations facing economic hardships. I am closing off by advocating for the right to access amenities without tenure not only fosters economic integration by empowering squatters to contribute to our local economic development, but also to address public health concerns promoting social equity. So, I want to know if my opposition is trying to tell me that because we don't have a right to these things, we cannot bathe, we cannot iron, we cannot eat, we can't even put on proper clothes because we have no right to amenities, but however, we have a right to vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We will now call the second speaker from the opposition team.
Ladies and gentlemen, judges, my opponents, my colleagues. The first speaker began with a definition for what a squatter is, and she called my team and I misguided, but they are misguiding you all. Let me give a proper definition for what a squatter is. According to Oxford, a squatter is a person who unlawfully occupies, let me repeat, unlawfully occupies an uninhabited building or piece of land. And they are saying that we have no heart and that we have no sympathy, but I am hearing an underlying tone of ungratefulness for all the government has done for squatters. They are trying to find an easy fix just by supplying them with water or supplying them with electricity, but that does not solve the problem. Simply giving them these basic amenities does not solve the problem. So we hear your heart and we hear that you are trying, but there are systems in place. And you simply breaking these systems will not, once again, solve the problem. And we do not agree with the fact that you are using your sympathy for them to trump the law, because human rights does not trump the law. We are considerate and we are compassionate and we are sympathetic, but we need to know that there is a base of legality in this situation. The government provides, but yet the underlying tone of ungratefulness is heard once again. When they say the cost of living is too high, that's why they are on the poorer side. We raise the minimum wage. Then they begin to say, oh, they can't afford that. So what are they going to do now? The government provides grants. The government has provided time and time again with different organizations such as the Housing Development Corporation, HDC, with institutions such as the Home Construction Subsidy, with grants, with the government-aided self-help housing programs, with the accelerated housing program. I could go on all day, but the government has provided. But then they will say, and people have said, that it takes too long. Why are they taking so long? And then they also complain that it's not going to the right people, then contradicting themselves, because we take the time. The government takes its time to go through each application, takes its time to give it to who they have to give it to. But then the underlying tone of ungratefulness is heard once again. We will not stand for the easy fix, and once again, we're not being lethal, we're being logical. And my opponents to my right are using your empathy against you. Yes, we want the best for all our citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, but it doesn't make sense if we just give them what we think they need. We need to give them what will really benefit not only them, but the country. Simply giving them these utilities are adding more bills, and I'm certain that they don't want the government to pay for the squatters' electricity bills and water bills. So they are going to give the squatters more bills in order to help the squatters. But that doesn't sound logical. But as I continue, Act 25 of the State Lands Regularization of Tenure Act of 1998 says that with specific says that with specific regularizations, once you have specific things in place and you go to the government, that they will provide a safer environment for you. If you've been on a piece of land for 16 years or more, that the exact same people, LSA, who are having this debate, will provide for you. But they once again come with their emotions. We need to find a true structural way, because when we mitigate structure, then there is chaos. So ladies and gentlemen, let us not stand for illegality, because I know that I will not stand for it, not here or on anybody else's piece of land. I thank you.
We would now like to call the summary speaker from the proposition team, Ms. Cornelius. I would like to remind the summary speakers that you all have 4 minutes.
Good. All protocols observed. My opponents want to talk about squatters. These same squatters that are so ungrateful. The government come in every election running up the hill, down the hill, inside the track, between the tracks to beg for votes. Imagine that. But all you want to talk about squatters ungrateful? Well, you're good, yes? Access to basic amenities is an undeniable fundamental human right, as highlighted by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Squatters often facing economic hardships deserve these necessities without tenure requirements, a principle supported by global initiatives such as Brazil Bolsa Familia program. Beyond being a matter of compassion, providing basic amenities to marginalized individuals contributes significantly to poverty alleviation, fosters community stability, and addresses social equity concerns. Moreover, granting squatters access to basic essentials isn't a humanitarian effort, but a strategic move for economic integration. By enabling them to utilize their skills in areas, we empower them to break the cycle of poverty and contribute to our local economic development. Denying these rights not only perpetuates poverty, but also poses public health risks. Inadequate amenities compromise waste disposal and personal hygiene, potentially causing widespread illnesses. Recognizing and ensuring access to basic amenities for squatters is not only a moral essential, but a step towards a more equitable society. Let us talk about what my opponents had to talk about: property rights and versus human rights. While property rights are essential, they are not absolute and must be balanced against fundamental human rights. Denying access to basic amenities without tenure disproportionately infringes upon the basic human rights to water, sanitation, and adequate living conditions. With everything that I have said, I do hope that I have changed your view on how we as a society look at unfortunate people and have a change of heart. Nobody could tell me and my teammates that it is not a human right to access fundamental and basic needs such as food, water, shelter, and clothing, and tell me they deserve to face tenure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today to discuss a matter of utmost importance.
And we will now call the speaker from the opposition team to give the summary.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. The motion put forth today states, be it resolved that squatters should be granted access to basic amenities such as water and electricity without tenure. Today, the proposition would have us believe that human rights trumps the laws of this country. They believe that giving amenities would solve the issue of poverty. They believe that granting these amenities would help to bring stability to communities. They believe that it will foster economic integration. They believe that it will promote equality in this country. They believe that this will improve the health lives of those squatters. But today, these misdirected opponents of yours have done the research to prove why this motion should not be passed. Normalizing squatting contributes to the rising crime rates in this country, and we are here today to say that no, we are not rewarding criminal acts. As my colleague has mentioned before, that promoting squatting only encourages it more. It only encourages it more, and that would break our legal fabric by disobeying the laws that are created to see the betterment of this country. And it is also saying that property rights has no purpose and that the law-abiding man has done all that hard work for nothing by going along and following the law to ensure that he can acquire his land legally. We are saying that persons who have illegally acquired these lands can bear the benefits given to citizens by these countries without having to suffer any consequences. We are saying that redirecting taxpayers' dollars to accommodate this crime could lead to the misuse of our country's resources, when they could have instead gone to the education sector, health sector, or even the infrastructure sector to help improve this country's economy. We are saying that there are establishments created solely to aid in this housing problem. They may not be perfect like Princess Diana, but these establishments can be improved. So why not redirect our efforts and resources to improving these establishments? So in closing, we are saying that we must ensure that we maintain both compassion and legality. Let us build a future where dignity stands resilient, and for this reason, we say no to this motion. I thank you.
We'd like to thank both teams for putting forth their arguments so passionately. We'll give the judges a few minutes, and the teams, y'all can go downstairs, and we'll invite 2 other schools to come up. Okay, so we are ready to start again. We will now call the first speaker from the proposition team, Mr. Cooper.
Now, I know you just heard it on pan, but I'd like to remind the House of the words of our national anthem. Here, every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Good morning, audience, judges, opposition. I ask you, what do the words of our national anthem mean to you? Because to the proposition, it means that every human being under the sun should have equal access to basic human rights. The United Nations, through their Resolution 64/292, explicitly recognizes access to clean water and sanitation services as necessary in fulfillment of basic human rights. Now, therefore, denying squatters access to basic amenities foregoes the act of caring for all of our citizens. Now, it is imperative for us to emphasize that the proposition today is not sanctioning squatting. Rather, we are pleading to you that squatters are simply victims of circumstance and denying them access to basic amenities is simply inhumane. Now, the motion, be it resolved that squatters should have access to basic amenities without tenure. Firstly, as proposition speaker, I would like to highlight the dangers in denying persons their human right to access basic amenities and how they affect the environment, our infrastructure, and our health facilities. Our second speaker, Ashish Basdeo, will firstly highlight the causes of squatting circumstances as well as the dangers in illegal connections made by squatters. Our final speaker, Issa Mohammed, will provide an overview of our main points as well as give a summary of the notion as a whole. Allow me to set the parameters for this debate. The State Lands Regularization of Tenure Act defines a squatter as any person in occupation of state land without probable claim or pretense to the title. Additionally, Oxford Dictionary defines tenure as the conditions through which land is held or occupied legally. We must now highlight the immense dichotomy between squatters, those who abuse resources due to lack of accountability, and those who access these resources by unsafe and unsustainable means. My first point, there are many negative environmental impacts in denying squatters access to their basic human rights. I'm sure we're all aware of the current climate situation in Trinidad and Tobago. What you may not know is that our country is ranked 7th in the world in terms of carbon emissions per capita, according to the World Bank Organization. To put it simply, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing far too much. Squatters may contribute to this already alarming climate situation due to a sheer lack of accountability. In other words, from a squatter's perspective, no bills equals AC staying on. Now, ladies and gents, they can attempt to conserve energy resources and reduce carbon footprint in Trinidad and Tobago upon receiving a bill in their hands. Secondly, on the point of infrastructure, I'll address the elephant in the room. So squatters not paying property tax, not a cent for utilities, but we must take money to give them basic amenities. To that notion, the proposition says legalize it. In fact, the benefits of allowing squatters rights to access basic amenities are inexhaustible. I shall explain. As my colleague Ashish will expand upon, the squatting population in Trinidad and Tobago does not exist only out of poverty. So no, people, squatters are not just people running from bills. To this effect, it would benefit the country as a whole if squatters accessed basic amenities because, follow me here, in subsequently paying for these amenities, squatters generate income for our government, which can then be used to greatly improve infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago. Professor of Regional and Urban Planning at UWI, Michelle Maiku, has suggested that roughly 40% of Trinidad and Tobago's population is squatting. So next time Uncle complain about potholes, tell him maybe we should give WASA a little bill for squatters. Next, on the topic of health. Imagine you're exposed to dysentery, cholera, malaria, all because of your circumstance. This, members of the House, is the state of many squatting communities across the world, according to the World Health Organization. We see that in these areas, people are being deprived of, they will find a way to get. And with improper means of acquiring these amenities, they pose severe health risks to those around them. For example, the World Health Organization has given us the example of Nepal. In Nepal, roughly 80% of the total population is accessing unsafe drinking water. And through the prevalence of this practice, diseases such as cholera, dysentery, and diarrhea are plaguing its citizens. To bring this point home, what do Trinbagonians love to do when it rains? Put out a bucket. This practice not only provides breeding grounds for mosquitoes, which spread diseases such as malaria, but they harm our health facilities. Let's say, for some reason, you do not care about squatters. I thank you.
We'll now call our first speaker for the opposition team, Ms. Chablal.
Good morning, everyone. We represent Arima Central Secondary School. My team comprises myself, Sole Gilbert, and Azizi Williams. Today, we stand in opposition on the motion that squatters should have a right to access basic amenities such as water and electricity. While we understand your point that squatters are all human beings and that we should that we are all human beings and that we should be accommodated to all rights equally. But nowadays, in recent times, there are more opportunities to acquire housing in regularized squatting communities through the LSA. Therefore, there is no need to access these basic amenities illegally. There are now established laws and guidelines to provide proper housing to persons in need. However, we want to firstly highlight the State Land Regularization of Tenure Act Chapter 5705, Act Number 25 of 1998, which states that the age-old squatting is illegal. Despite the fact that the LSA has even regularized squatting communities in designated areas such as Jacob Hill, persons should find legal means of acquiring housing. In contemporary times, this sets a dangerous precedent to give unauthorized access to private or state lands. Giving squatters without tenure access to these basic amenities undermines legal rights over state land after the year 1998 would encourage illegal habits. Although squatters may argue that they have no choice but to occupy land illegally, their actions have numerous negative impacts on the community. What are the negative impacts of squatters' illegal actions of using these basic amenities illegally? Squatters resort to illegal connections to their structures. Unauthorized connections to the power supply can pose serious safety hazards to all individuals in the entire community, such as fire or electrocution. This can also overload transformers. Which can even lead to power outages or even blackouts. Ultimately, the illegal use of electricity violates the existing rules and jeopardizes the stability of the electrical supply unit. Illegal use of water in squatting communities undermines the integrity of the water supply and can have serious consequences. Yet still, according to the LSA, squatters have continued to put up structures throughout the nation. Thank you.
We'd now like to call the second speaker from the proposition team, Mr. Basdeo.
Testing, testing. Land use has historically been favored over disuse, and that therefore he who uses land is preferred in the law to he who does not, even though the latter is the rightful owner. Finley against Yuba County, 1979. Pleasant good morning, all ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I shall now discuss the reasons why many people live under squatting circumstances in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the right and responsibility of various landowners to secure all and monitor all of their properties. So, before I begin, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with a quick poll, all right? So, members of the audience, by a show of hands, how much of y'all's parents applied for HDC houses before you were even born, and years after you were born, they are yet to receive their HDC units? Right. Wow, excellent. Thank you, thank you. And this is backed up by HDC website statistics, where according to these statistics, there were at least 191,000 applicants on waiting list as of 2022, with even the Honorable Prime Minister saying that at a rate of constructing 10,000 homes annually, government would still not be able to make a dent on that list. Ladies and gentlemen, while we can see that HDC was introduced to combat the housing shortage, it is clearly seen that it has now become inefficient, unrealistic, and inaccessible, with many people, particularly our self-employed persons, our barbers, our taxi drivers, our doubles vendors, people might have to resort to squatting to simply live. And since the government was unable to provide an adequate solution to this housing shortage, should they not then provide the right to access basic amenities to these people who are simply trying to survive? Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, my opposition would have mentioned that one of the downsides to squatting was that many squatters would take they would make illegal electrical connections to themselves. So I would like to thank them for saying that, because this proves that since they're going to take it illegally anyways, they don't have electricity, they don't have water, they're going to take it themselves, which is why governments should ensure that there's a proper authorized access to these electrical connections so that they don't overload the power grids. Because according to former leader of government business, Clarence Rambarat, TNTech had to deal with about 4,774 people who had illegal connections. And it was reported by CNC3 that $1.3 million worth of illegal electricity was used due to these unauthorized connections. And as the opposition would have also said, it does lead to many hazards. And that is why the government should ensure that there is provision to these basic amenities like electricity and water. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clearly seen that these people who are squatting are simply humans trying to live. They deserve rights. We should not be infringing on their basic human rights. And lastly, before we leave, ladies and gentlemen, the proposition wishes to clarify once more that we do not support the illegal practice of squatting. Because as a landowner, you have every right to kick out a squatter from your premises. You have every right to monitor your property, whether you want to patrol the land, whether you want to use a satellite map, whether you want to put up a sign, put up a fence, whatever the case may be, that is your right and that is your responsibility. And the law of the land states that in 16 years for private lands and 30 years for state lands, undisturbed presence gives squatters rights to these lands. That is embedded in the law itself. So squatters do indeed have rights to these lands. And that is why we believe you should protect your own property. And that is also why there should be rights to access basic amenities for people trying to live on these lands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll now call the second speaker from the opposition team.
Thank you. Right. Good morning. Now, whereas we understand your point that you're saying squatters should be allowed to access state lands without tenure, this is not true. Why this should not be regularized is because we offer other amenities such as subsidized loans and to to designate state lands for the government to provide rental homes on a need basis for squatters without tenure. This transfers into my point that there are negative impacts on legitimate real estate in Trinidad and Tobago. These negative consequences, coupled together with setting a dangerous precedent, put a strain on the country's resources. And this discourages investments in real estate. For persons who are seeking legitimate housing, they may now feel as though this is unfair and unjust, in the case that it is. Additionally, access to these amenities, such as water and electricity, would not leave room for access to roads and other amenities, such as electricity. Is that the precedent that we want to set? Certainly not. Moreover, this encourages illegal behavior to persons and setting a bad example by legalizing this behavior. This further decimates the environment, encouraging deforestation, soil erosion, and flooding, which is a common occurrence in Trinidad and Tobago. We promote more sustainable ways in helping persons in need of housing, such as listed before, subsidized loans and designating state lands to build rental homes for persons on a need basis. We stand firmly against the legalization of state lands without tenure and authorization of water and electricity and basic amenities to persons without tenure. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, we'd like to apologize to the schools that went before. You all were correct in that the opposition summary speaker is supposed to go first. So we'd like to call the opposition summary speaker to give your final points.
As we conclude, we want to reiterate that squatting sets a dangerous precedent. Squatting is also illegal. Squatting has too many environmental and economic consequences. We acknowledge human rights for persons to access basic amenities such as water and electricity, and the government's role in ensuring that it is available to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. However, we must certainly encourage legitimate means for persons to acquire housing and basic amenities, as squatting communities must meet certain requirements. To close, we repeat our stance. We stand firmly against the illegal occupation of state lands without tenure and giving unauthorized access to these amenities to squatters, as squatting is detrimental to the environment. Squatting is clearly illegal, and squatting restricts our economic growth. Thank you.
And we'll now call the summary speaker from the proposition team.
Testing. All right. We are not sanctioning squatting, but rather we are sanctioning human rights. Good morning, all protocols observed. Today, I'll be focusing on the key differences between the points presented today by the proposition and the opposition, and I will be reinforcing the argument as to why squatters should be allowed or should have the right to access basic amenities. Members of the House, the first opposition speaker said that squatters should not have the right to access basic amenities, for example, things like water. However, as the first proposition speaker said, Khalil, he said in 2010, the UN explicitly recognized water and sanitation as basic human rights. Thus, the opposition intends to deny these squatters of their basic human rights. Khalil also went to mention about the negative environmental and health impacts if we deny these people of their basic human rights. The first proposition speaker agreed with us. They helped us by saying that there are so many dangers, environmental dangers, when we deny these people of their human rights, such as water and electricity. Because when we deny these people, they're going to want to take it for themselves. And when they do that, they risk electrocution, as the first opposition speaker stated. They risk contaminating the water supply, etc. Furthermore, the second proposition speaker, Ashish, spoke about how the government failed to provide affordable housing accommodations for squatters. Thus, they need to provide the right to access those basic amenities now that we do have squatters. The second opposition speaker stated that we should, and I quote, "we offer other amenities, designated state lands, loans, etc." Who is we, by the way? The second opposition speaker also stated that the squatters should resort to real estate. However, according to the Trinidad and Tobago Express, the real estate market is flooded with homes that the average citizen cannot afford. And finally, we agree that squatting is potentially dangerous. We agree it is illegal. However, these squatters are still humans. They still have rights. And if we are no longer concerned about the basic rights of the humans in Trinidad and Tobago, then may God bless our nation.
Okay, thanks to both teams for presenting your arguments. We will now have a 15-minute break, so we will reconvene after that break. Okay, so we will begin. We will now call the members of the proposition and the opposition team. From St. Mary's College, we have Terrell Thomas, Aaron Baksh, and Darius Dick. You all are the proposition team. And from St. Augustine Girls High School, we have Kira Gonzalez, Julia Lachman Singh, and Ashalia Small. We would now like to call the first speaker from the proposition team, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. Perhaps, in addressing the squatter dilemma today, we discern echoes of ancient wisdom to influence our present-day discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, distinguished members of the audience, and worthy opponents. My name is Terrell Thomas, and I stand before you today as first proposition to acknowledge a fundamental question. Should squatters have access to basic amenities without tenure? This resolution questions if individuals living in squatter settlements should unquestionably be provided with access to basic services such as water, food, roads, sanitation, and electricity, regardless of their legal property tenure. As the first proposition, I will address the humanitarian perspective, consider public health implications, and address the government's responsibilities. Subsequently, my second speaker will address the historical context of squatting and land ownership, consider ways to prevent urban decay, and to promote economic productivity. Firstly, let us begin by remembering the human faces behind this debate. It's not just about amenities. It's about offering a glimmer of hope to those in challenging circumstances. Access to basic amenities is not just a privilege. It is a fundamental and basic human right. And denying individuals access to these essentials required for a dignified life not only jeopardizes their well-being, but it dehumanizes them and it challenges the very principles upon which our society is built upon. It is our moral duty to ensure that every individual, regardless of their legal status, has the essentials required for a dignified life. Also, it is imperative to note that allowing squatters without tenure access to basic amenities does not promote or incentivize more squatting. Instead, it gives a practical response to an existing challenge, ensuring a balanced approach between property and human rights. Secondly, governments have a responsibility to provide the basic needs to all citizens, including squatters, according to the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that squatters should have access to basic amenities, which is shown in its commitment to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which was signed on December 8, 1978 by Albert Gomez. It is crucial to note that the Land Settlement Agency and the proposition share a fundamental goal: promoting less squatting and seeing the needs of those in housing challenges. Lastly, public health implications. The government and we, the proposition, should decide that squatter settlements, aiding them with necessities, contributes to the overall public health, which, in long-term saving, it helps the law enforcement by sharing and helping by preventing diseases and conditions. Lastly, I would like for everyone today to picture a child, the son or daughter of squatters, navigating through a world, a home without the access to a home with basic necessities. Their dreams and innocence should not be overshadowed by debates over property rights. Ladies and gentlemen, supporting the proposition means extending basic amenities to these children: clean water, a secure home, and education, giving them a chance for what each and every one of us utilize daily. Lastly, as first proposition, I debated why squatters should have access to basic amenities. I covered the humanitarian perspective, spoke about the government's responsibilities, and spoke about public health considerations and long-term cost savings. Thank you for listening to my debate today on why all squatters should have access to what we utilize daily. Thank you.
We'd now like to call the first speaker from the opposition team, Ms. Gonzalez.
At least 79% of the squatting sites are involved in sex rings, crime, robberies, and drugs, said Dr. L. Trevor Grant in his book, Living Dangerously, Squatting in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, squatting is illegal. By the State Lands Act Chapter 57, under Section 1, outlaws the act of squatting on state lands whereby any person in possession of a state parcel without probable claim or pretense of title may be summoned to court to prove his entitlement or permission to occupy same. Should the squatter fail to provide the court with adequate evidence in support of his occupation, he will be ordered out of possession and sentenced to imprisonment of up to 6 months. As the first speaker of the opposition, I will introduce to you the opposition's argument and convince you that squatting should not be condoned. Our second speaker will carry our second argument by discussing further evidence, and our third speaker will summarize our argument and the propositions and leave you in no doubt that squatting should not be condoned. Now, what is a squatter? A squatter is defined in the state lands, that is, the Regularization of Tenure Act, Chapter 57, under Section 5, Act Number 25 of 1998, as a person who is in actual occupation of state lands without probable claim or pretense of title thereto. This refers to persons occupying state lands without permission for residential, agricultural, or business purposes. Additionally, though, squatting takes place in privately owned lands in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, to give some context of the gravity of squatting in Trinidad and Tobago, according to surveys undertaken by the Land Settlement Agency, approximately 60,000 families or 300,000 persons were squatting on approximately 351 squatting settlements. And this is only increasing. In fact, according to the Land Settlement Agency, from 2021 to 2022, illegal structures identified, the total illegal structures identified increased from 293 to 371. Now, why is squatting disadvantageous? The most prevalent issue associated with squatting, according to Ferguson, 1996, is that these developments take place spontaneously and are largely unplanned. These squatting settlements may solve the individual household problem. However, it creates tremendous environmental impacts and public costs, which are borne by the wider society. The issue of squatters moving into uninhabited areas is that it has significant environmental impacts. As they clear land for housing, either through clear cutting or slash and burn techniques, deforestation occurs, and this leads to the loss of natural habitats, species diversity, and forest products like mora trees. This clearance exposes soil to erosion, causes runoffs, landslides, and floods. The removal of trees affects soil fertility, disrupts the water cycle, alters rainfall patterns, and reduces water quality. Furthermore, it heightens vulnerability to natural disasters like hurricanes, as seen with mangrove trees acting as a buffer against coastal erosion and storm damage. Deforestation also disrupts the carbon cycle by reducing carbon storage in trees and releasing carbon dioxide gas into residential areas, but also encroaches on fertile agricultural land, reducing food growing space and impacting the nation's ability to sustain itself. Additionally, the loss of forested areas affects potable water supplies due to increased sedimentation in rivers. The consequences of squatter settlements on the environment are broad-ranging and have lasting effects on ecosystems, climate, and resources like water and agricultural land. Now, socially, those who support squatters' rights have an opinion that homelessness should not be criminalized. However, instead of advocating for the legalization of seizures of private property, which can encourage more squatting, they should focus on advocating for the expansion of social housing availability, because rewarding these squatters can incite more criminal activities. Lastly, squatting limits children's access to school, impacting attendance due to distance and financial barriers. In squatting settlements, education is seen as a low priority, and this leads to dropouts and thereby limited job prospects. Therefore, squatting perpetuates the cycle of poverty. Thank you.
We'll now call Mr. Bach from the proposition team.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, respected members of the audience, and my worthy opponents. My name is Aaron Bach, and I stand before you today to give reasons for why squatters should have access to basic amenities without conferring land tenure rights. Let us begin by defining a fundamental concept: urban decay. What is urban decay? Well, it's a major issue that encompasses the physical, social, and economic decline of urban areas. It is exacerbated by rural-urban migration from squatter settlements, mainly due to the neglect of basic amenities there. It is crucial to clarify that the proposition does not advocate for increasing squatting. Rather, our stance revolves around addressing the immediate human needs without implicitly endorsing the violation of property rights. Basic amenities like electricity can be used as a short-term measure while long-term legal solutions are found. This approach allows for the immediate improvement of living conditions without granting permanent land entitlement. Amenities foster the environment for small businesses to thrive, which lead to a positive economic impact in marginalized communities. These populations face many challenges, such as even the recent COVID-19 pandemic, unemployment, and even housing availability, which gives many reason to focus on providing amenities for them, as it will contribute to solving the broader socioeconomic problems at hand. Let us continue by discussing places like Mumbai, India, where initiatives were taken to provide sanitation, clean water, and electricity to informal settlements. This provided a positive economic impact and provided a local scene for entrepreneurship. Legislation itself agrees with the need for improvement of living conditions, where it emphasizes the need for basic amenities for squatters and the need to pass laws for human rights of them. In Act 25 of the State Lands Regularization of Tenure, it was created due to the demand from the population to have access to residential areas and improve their living conditions. Lastly, let us focus on the historical context of squatting itself. Prior to the abolition of slavery in the British West Indies in 1834, squatting was not widely known as a criminal offense. Rather, many individuals, particularly freed slaves, were allowed to build settlements on unclaimed parcels. Land commodification, including its purchase and sale, diverges from the intrinsic nature of communal land use, of which the freed slaves used to practice. It is crucial to acknowledge that the framing of squatting as a criminal offense is a modern construct, which was originated as a means to enforce controls over these populations. Understanding the old versus modern practices gives many reasons to reevaluate the disallowance of basic amenities to these squatters. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, it is important to remember that the proposition, while we do not advocate for increasing squatting, humanitarian needs demand our attention. Let our decisions reflect the need for us to provide for these people that struggle and their well-being as well. I thank you all for listening.
We'll now call Ms. Lakshman Singh from the opposition team.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Lakshman Singh, and as the second speaker of the opposition team, I am going to continue this debate on why should squatters not have access to basic amenities. Before I begin, I just want to reiterate that we are not against the squatters. We are against the law which prevents them from having access to these basic amenities, such as electricity and water. So in order for this problem to change, the law needs to be adjusted and rethought. So firstly, as mentioned before, the example given was from Mumbai, India. But times have changed now from back then, and the laws here are different in Trinidad and Tobago. So firstly, squatters do not own the piece of property they are staying on, so they should not be able to have the same rights as tenants or owners of a property. Because unlike squatters, tenants actually pay rent for their properties, and they also pay fees for these basic amenities such as electricity and water. But squatters create illegal connections even though in which they can access electricity and water free of charge. But this causes companies to have a major loss as their resources and services are being used free of charge. I am now going to present two pieces of evidence. The first piece of evidence came from a Guardian article. So according to the Water and Sewerage Authority, also known as WASA, squatters build structures and dig dirt either on top or around the main water line, which is illegal, but this does not stop them from stealing water via illegal connections. And if they are caught, they will be charged with a fine of up to $3,000 or 6 months imprisonment. As well as according to the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, TNTEC, squatters steal electricity from the electricity poles via illegal connections, which can result in up to 5 years imprisonment. The problem with this is that when they realize that the owners have to pay more for their bills because the squatters stealing from their line, they could end up losing the electricity because they refuse to pay extra for what the squatters used. So this can result in having a loss of income. And finally, the resources from these companies become used up free of charge, which creates major losses for these companies. And some certain people will need to stay without these amenities, as there may be insufficient funds available to create or access more resources due to the squatters not paying for these and using it up, while the people who actually pay for it will need to stay without, which is unfair to them. Thank you.
We'll now call Ms. Small from the opposition team to give her summary.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges. I am Ashayla Small, and I will be summarizing the points made in this debate today. Undoubtedly, both sides have made coherent arguments on the topic of squatting. And to reiterate, a squatter is a person who is in actual occupation of state or private land without probable claims or pretense of title thereto. People squat for a variety of reasons, for example, financial or political. It is understandable that many may not be able to afford amenities in today's economy, as prices are rising and things are becoming more expensive day by day, and thus they resort to squatting. Squatting can also be related to political movements and can be a means to conserve buildings or protest action. While the reason some people squat may be disheartening, it is still a relevant form of criminal activity. This criminal activity should not be advocated for nor justified. The proposition team claims that squatters should have a right to basic amenities such as water, food, sanitation, and electricity. This is illogical, as the reason why they squat in the first place is that they cannot afford these fundamental utilities. Supplying them with these amenities does not solve the problem, as they would still not be able to afford to sustain them. However, protesting that the squatters should not have the right to basic amenities is rational and just. Allow me to explain. As previously mentioned, entitling squatters to basic resources without tenure is unfair to those who have legitimately acquired tenure and continue to pay for these amenities. It is important to remember that the act of squatting is a criminal offense, and such practices should not be rewarded. We like to mention that squatters are not the problem, it is the law. If we want to provide the squatters with these amenities, the law needs to change. It is the law that is criminalizing these acts. It should also be noted that the pervasive societal issue has long-term effects on the ecosystem, biodiversity, climate, and resources such as water and agricultural land. Squatting contributes to many social issues such as health, education, infrastructural and environmental challenges, and of course, crime. This maintains a cycle of poverty and may inspire criminal conduct. In conclusion, we should advocate for more social and affordable housing to deter people from squatting as opposed to encouraging it. Prevention is always better than cure. Thank you for listening.
And finally, Mr. Dick from the proposition side.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, honored audience members, and my worthy yet misguided opposition speakers. My name is Darius Dick, and I am the third proposition speaker representing St. Mary's College. Today, I stand before you to advocate for why squatters should have access to basic amenities despite a lack of land tenure rights, as I reinforce the already compelling arguments brought to you by my first and second speakers, Terrell Thomas and Aaron Bash, respectively. Our journey throughout this discourse has illuminated the multifaceted nature of this topic. Our speeches encompass the various historical perspectives, legal observations, and urgent humanitarian needs of those in squatting settlements. Denying squatters access to basic amenities is equivalent to denying a dying person a hospital bed. It is not only ethically wrong, but it is an unreasonable obstruction of their basic human rights. Considering a humanitarian standpoint, we can all agree that access to fundamental services is paramount in safeguarding the health and well-being of those in squatting communities. It is an indisputable ethical principle that all humans, regardless of their social and economic standing, deserve access to basic services in order to facilitate conventional living. The government, who is responsible for societal well-being, is also inherently responsible for addressing the basic needs of those in squatting settlements. Their duty extends beyond individual rights, but also includes promoting social welfare and fostering the inclusive development of all. By ensuring that even the most marginalized members of society have access to basic human rights, we can create a more equitable and just community. Additionally, public health considerations add a crucial layer to this perspective by emphasizing the pivotal role of amenities in disease prevention and the reduction of overall healthcare costs. Access to clean water, proper sanitation, and proper waste management and disposal not only impacts individual health, but also contributes to community-wide disease spread prevention. In this context, it is not only an ethical obligation, but also a strategic investment in the overall health of the population. Furthermore, the proposition advocates for the implementation and reinforcement of legal frameworks in order to address illegal occupancy. We believe that through strict laws, we can deter settlement while still ensuring the well-being of citizens. We would also like to highlight that through cost-effective solutions, streamlined administrative procedures, and efficient resource allocation, we can maximize our usage of our limited resources without compromising provision of essential services. As I conclude, I would like to reiterate a quote from one of the most impactful human rights activists. As Mahatma Gandhi said, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." Thank you.
Thank you to both teams. We will now allow the judges to do their deliberations, and you guys are free to go. And from Naparima College, our opposition team, we have Saeed Ali, Adam Ram Sahai, and Deepanshu, sorry if I pronounced your name wrongly, Kumar. We invite you to come and take your seats on this side. We will now invite the first speaker from the proposition team, Ms. Samaru.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, and honorable opposition. Good luck to you. We as the proposition will be presenting that squatters should have the right to access basic amenities without tenure. My name is Sophia Samaru. I will be doing the introduction and first point. Kelly's Mitchell will be doing our second and third points, and Kaya Toussaint will be doing our summary. Basic amenities are defined by Merriam-Webster as things considered essential to make life easier and more pleasant. In this context, that includes things like roads, running water, and electricity, among others. Additionally, A squatter is defined by the State Lands Regularization of Tenure Act, Chapter 5707, as a person who is in actual occupation of state lands without probable claim or pretense of a title thereto. To begin, basic amenities are considered as a human right. Therefore, how is it in any way moral to deprive anyone, no matter of housing situation, this right? Additionally, the problem is often not that they are ineligible for tenure, but that needless government backlogs and the bureaucracy can often delay the process, sometimes up to a decade. Is it fair that we should also delay their access to basic amenities for that same period of time? Furthermore, access to basic amenities does not only benefit the squatters themselves, but can also make squatting communities safer, more educated, and more developed, which benefits the entire country on a whole. To begin, basic amenities are a human right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25, states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family. This includes food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. To deprive anyone, whether squatter or not, of these amenities is internationally recognized as ethically wrong. In fact, we are seeing the deprivation of these amenities being used in Gaza, to flush out Hamas militants. It is a war tactic, and one that is being frowned upon by the international community, especially as it is having such negative effects on the innocent Palestinian people. It was also used in Syria, where National Geographic reported that, quote, repeatedly, Syrian government forces besieged rebel areas under control, placing a blockade on incoming supplies while bombing markets, hospitals, and civilian targets. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Human Rights Group were among those who accused the Syrian regime of committing war crimes. Let me say that again. They accused them of committing war crimes. So now I ask you this question. Are we at war with squatters? Now, the opposition may try to convince you that basic amenities are not considered human rights. However, that has no base. As previously stated, basic amenities are things considered necessary to make life easier and more pleasant. This includes having running water instead of having to run to get to water, having electricity, and having social services near enough so that they are accessible to the community. Do we not consider these things human rights? Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right to education, cannot be accessed without schools nearby, which qualifies under social services. Article 23, the right to work, cannot be utilized, again, without having transport systems and roads in place to allow people to get to their place of work. Basic amenities are human rights, and it is unjust and immoral to only provide these rights to those of us who are lucky enough to not have to beg for them. Thank you.
Will now come Mr. Ram Sahai.
Good morning, esteemed judges, chairpersons, distinguished guests, proposition, other members of the House. Today, my colleagues and I stand before you strongly opposing the motion, be it resolved that squatters should have a right to access basic amenities without tenure. Firstly, the proposition heavily emphasized that it is a basic human right to have these amenities. In fact, they mentioned the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. But the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights never explicitly says that these basic amenities are a human right. Simply, shelter is a human right. And that leads me to my first point, which is the issue of another kind of rights, which is property rights and legal precedent. This is Trinidad and Tobago. We are not a lawless state. We have property rights in Trinidad and Tobago, and allowing squatters access to basic amenities undermines the concept of property rights that we have, because we cannot be picking and choosing which laws we are going to follow and which laws we are going to neglect. Also, this opens the door for questioning, again, what other laws can we neglect and choose to follow? An example of this is in Brazil in 2013 when there were protests against squatters. People were being rewarded for breaking the law, as the protesters stated, and this caused a continuation of these mass protests across Brazil. Also, the proposition mentioned the example of Syria. While we, the opposition, sympathize with people in Syria, I must remind you that this is not Syria, this is Trinidad and Tobago. We have no ongoing war in Trinidad and Tobago that is affecting the process of tenureship in Trinidad and Tobago. That leads me to my next point, which is the burden on the state. Has the proposition taken into consideration the burden on the state? As we learned with the literature that the Land Settlement Agency sent out, there's a lack of oversight in areas that are being occupied without tenure. This leaves room for abuse of these basic amenities that you're proposing to allow. I'm sure many of you in the audience, if you could occupy land without tenure and you're being allowed the basic amenities, you would by all means take up that opportunity. I know I would. And this is exactly why it encourages more and more persons to practice it. In June 2022, there was a Newsday article that reported on squatters occupying lands for financial gain in Trinidad and Tobago by deliberately going in areas where they expected government to set up civil infrastructure and would have to then compensate them for those lands. If we are to allow them basic amenities, we are just giving persons more and more opportunities for these sorts of practices. And that leads me to my third point, which is alternative solutions. By all means, we, the opposition, are by no means against the human rights of squatters. In fact, we are for their rights more than the proposition, which is why the real issue we need to be discussing is alternative solutions, not allowing basic amenities. For example, we need to be talking about the government and the Housing Development Corporation having more low-income housing, making it easier to access tenure, and microfinancing and loans so that persons can have tenure. Also on the topic of alternative solutions is the public safety concerns. Not only is it a concern for persons that are squatting, but also persons around them. In December 2023, just a month ago, a squatting community in northeastern Sangre Grande was reported on again by the Newsday. And when they interviewed a gentleman from the community, an elderly person in the community who has been there for decades, he stated that when the community was now set up with just a few squatting settlements and no amenities, it was a peaceful community. Today, that very same community has frequent protests about crime, not only within the community, but in the surrounding areas, and it is tied to the development of the communities as amenities were allowed in. So this is what we mean when we say that it's a public safety concern, not only for the squatters themselves, but also for the areas around them, which again, I emphasize that we are for their rights. We want better for them. Squatters don't want to be living their whole life just taking temporary solutions from the government. We want real permanent solutions, which is why we want alternative solutions. Thank you.
We'll now call Ms. Mitchell from the proposition team.
Good morning, everyone. I would just like to begin by saying, as much as there was a lot that I disagreed with, due to the time constraints, I won't be able to address everything. Firstly, I would like to mention the fact that they brought up the point that the UN treaty did not mention human rights, just mentioned shelter. But what kind of shelter is one that does not have access to running water and electricity? Even your animals, you feed your dog water every day, do you not? Okay. Furthermore, it was stated that squatting is a threat to public safety. And that could be true, but not in the way that you mentioned. I would like to hear facts and evidence that in the community that you mentioned, that squatting was the direct cause of the increase in crime. Because if we're being honest, Trinidad as a whole has had a very sharp increase in crime recently. And it's not just in areas that were once squatting communities. So to say that and imply that squatting is the cause of the crime rate is simply untrue. Provision of basic amenities is not only a humanitarian right, but also certainly should not be withheld due to nothing more than the slow pace of government bureaucracy and a backlog in government processes. Upon the establishment of the LSA, there was only one method of tenure security in Trinidad and Tobago. This was a three-part process that would begin with an application for a certificate of comfort, hereby referred to as the COC. After this, upon further investigation, if it was confirmed that the person applying for the plot of land was truly, in fact, occupying it before January 1st, 1999, one could then apply for a statutory lease, which was viable for a period of 30 years. However, this incurs even more intensive investigation. Finally, if one could afford it, you would pay a sum of 25% of the land's current market value to obtain a deed of lease, providing you with the land for a period of 199 years. Needless to say, even that summarized explanation is quite tedious, so imagine the actual undertaking of this process. In 2020, it was altered, and now people who were in occupation of a squatting land before June 14, 2014 can apply for the COC. However, the actual efficiency of the process has not been altered. If you really think about it, it is quite likely that someone applying for a COC will spend years, decades even, living in an area without access to these basic amenities, without access to running water and electricity. So, is it fair for someone to live without these amenities that are really necessary in this technological age while they are trying to follow the law? Is it fair to say that they should live without this? I think not. Should they be punished due to the inefficiency of government processes? I think not. In fact, I think to deny them of these rights is a greater crime, a greater injustice than the initial act of squatting itself. The state of our country is certainly deplorable if the one thing separating an already impoverished family from accessing basic amenities is if that one government worker decides to finally oversee the documents on his or her desk or take an early lunch. How could that ever be a way to live? Leaving citizens to live in less than fit conditions for years goes completely against the entire concept of squatter regularization. And therefore, if that is the case, the entire LSA should just be disbanded, because is that not the purpose of this organization? They should be given access to these basic amenities unless the LSA can guarantee a swift and fair process without unnecessary delays. You brought up the point of squatter safety, and I already addressed it, but I'd also like to say that we are also concerned about the safety in squatting communities, but not for the same reasons. And if you truly are concerned about the safety of squatters, you would then be pro them accessing basic amenities. Access to basic amenities such as clean water, electricity, healthcare, and sanitation can uplift squatter communities, making them safer by preventing disease spread, as well as accessibility to education, therefore benefiting the country as a whole. And you seem to be very pro the betterment of our country. By addressing the fundamental needs and providing squatter settlements with basic amenities, governments can break the cycle of poverty and improve overall living conditions almost immediately. Access to electricity and proper roads alone can open doors to economic opportunities, as it facilitates small businesses and educational pursuits. And if you really are concerned about crime, who has time to rob and kill when you have a job? And how can you get a job if you do not have access to electricity, if you don't have running water to get up and bathe any day and go to work? According to the World Bank, for instance, improvements in water and sanitation facilities are associated with higher school enrollment. Additionally, the United Nations Development Program emphasizes that access to basic amenities plays a pivotal role in creating an environment conducive to learning by reducing absenteeism and enhancing overall learning outcomes. And it makes sense. For example, if I lived in a squatting community and by your basis I was not allowed access to these basic amenities, I would not have time to come here today. I would not have time to study. Therefore, improved living conditions fosters a more educated populace and improves the country as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, our previous speaker from the opposition team was Mr. Ali, so now we'll call Mr. Ramsahai.
Honorable adjudicators, timekeepers, my worthy opponents from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, and most importantly, members of the House. We, the opposition, have been listening attentively to the arguments of our proposition. That being said, at every juncture, we disagree with what is being presented to this House this morning. Firstly, my proposition mentions that basic amenities are a human right, but is there right to access these amenities without tenure a human right? We want to make it easier for squatters. We care for squatters. However, it cannot be that squatters find themselves getting rights more than us, the law-abiding citizens of this nation. That is why we need to make the process easier for squatters to get tenure. Moving on, I'd also like to point out a hasty generalization on the part of the proposition. They seem to make the illusion that all squatters come from impoverished families. That being said, I would think that if my proposition would go to make such a vast and hasty illusion, a hasty generalization, they would provide some sort of evidence, some way to back up such a statement, not bringing examples from the other side of the world. Additionally, my honorable proposition mentioned the article that my friend Syed here would have mentioned this morning. I want to make it abundantly clear that in that article, squatting was mentioned as the key cause for that increase in crime. It was a community where squatting was on the low, and as the years have progressed, squatting and squatters have gotten the right to access basic amenities without tenure, and therefore even the long-standing residents of that community, those who do have tenure, went as far as protesting for the expulsion of these squatters. Now, moving right along once again, we thank our proposition for mentioning that government bureaucracy seems to hinder the process of tenure. That being said, I wasn't sure if my proposition was actually agreeing with us, because we made it clear we want alternative solutions in place to make it easier for squatters to get tenure. We need those alternative solutions, and going back to sources as far as 1999 cannot be taken as relevant in 2023. As well, I must point out that while the proposition seems to suggest measures and methods that would have fruition in a long term, the solutions that we here at the opposition table are presenting will have almost an immediate fix. Now, to add on to what my colleague has been presenting here this morning, we are also of the view that this motion before us this morning allows for inequality to those who abide by the law. How is it that we, the law-abiding citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, must go through legal channels to get the right to access basic amenities with tenure, whereas this motion proposes that we give the right to access basic amenities to squatters who do not have tenure of their land? Imagine the effort that we, those who abide by the law, put out to get this tenure, whereas we are just giving squatters a free pass. I cannot see that, especially in this day and age, as being fair in any way. Now, honorable members, I want to make it abundantly clear that even the weakest, most dilapidated squatter structure in this country, as we have seen, is stronger than any point that my proposition has brought forward here this morning. we have dealt with the problems. We have made it abundantly clear that the opposition is the correct side, that the proposition has flawed arguments. And we know that you, members of this honorable house, do not support the motion today. I thank you.
We would like to call Mr. Kumar from the opposition team to give his summary.
If the proposition were given the opportunity to run this country, I'd become a squatter too, until we fall into an economic state. The following week, of course. Good morning, respected judges, honorable chairpersons, accurate timekeepers, worthy opponents, and all members of the House. My name is Dipansh Kumar, member of the opposition, strongly opposing this motion, which states, be it resolved that squatters should have a right to access basic amenities without tenure. We sympathize with the members of the squatting community, and we believe that instead of just giving them basic amenities in these haphazard living situations, instead they should be able to own their own land and get their own tenure. There's so many immediate resolutions to this. As my first speaker, illustrious Syed Ali, stated, that we can implement microfinancing as well as other grants or loans. We would like to urge the government to look into low-income housing. Without the development of low-income housing, how can our squatters, who are less impoverished than others, can afford housing? I'd like to ask my proposition, where are their up-to-date sources to back up their claims? Is it here in my pocket? Or is it the same place where they left their relevant arguments? In their house. The proposition is encouraging squatting, which is endangering our own citizens. Imagine, one day it's raining a little too hard and the house collapses. I would like to re-emphasize what my first speaker stated earlier, that the state cannot sustain the financial burden that persists by squatters given our current economic situation. Trinidad and Tobago, recognized by the UN, is internationally titled as a small island developing state. But after hearing the arguments of the proposition, we might as well change it to small island regressing state, because they are regressing the development of our country. Together we aspire, together we achieve. If all of us citizens, law-abiding citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, cannot follow a simple law that our own leaders that we elected, we have the opportunity to elect them, and we are not even going to follow these simple laws that they put for us, then how can we ever have the unity to see a more developed nation? How can we see the light of a developed and prosperous Trinidad and Tobago? Thank you.
We'd like to call our final speaker from the proposition team to give her summary. You can hold the mic or you want me to hold it for you? Pardon? You can hold it or you want me to hold it for you?
I can hold it. Thank you.
Good morning. Contrary to what the opposition wants you to believe, as previously stated by both of my colleagues, basic amenities like water, electricity, healthcare, and sanitation are a human right for all people, not just those who could afford it. Especially since some squatters do in fact qualify for tenure. However, due to drawn-out government processes, they have to do without these amenities which tenure would award them. Also, granting squatters access to basic amenities would decrease the likelihood of communicable diseases spread countrywide. And by getting access to basic amenities, squatters, who are impoverished people living on state land, would be able to improve their quality of life. When they're not studying their needs, these people would now be able to give time to education, work, and daily life, which would not only elevate them, but the country as a whole, socioeconomically. To crystallize the proposition's point, the advantages to giving squatters access to basic amenities far outweigh any disadvantages. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toussaint. Thank you to both teams for your passionate arguments. We will now break for lunch. We will allow the judges to deliberate, and then we will return for the results. All right, so we'd like to ask everyone to take a seat even as we get ready to announce the results. Okay, as you all know, this debate is being executed by the Land Settlement Agency, particularly by the Community Development Unit of the Land Settlement Agency. And we just want to take a moment to recognize our manager of the Community Development Unit, Ms. Maria Batiste, who joined us. And we would like to thank all the schools for your participation, for your diligence in preparing your arguments, and for being here today and presenting your arguments convincingly. We also want to thank all the teachers and parents who assisted, and particularly for those who accompanied the students here today. And we thank you for your effort that you put into the debate. So without further ado, for the first round of the debate, we had Corpus Christi College versus Bishop's High School Tobago, and Corpus Christi had a total of 194 points, and Bishop got a total of 211 points, so Bishops will be going forward from this round. Then we had Presentation College debating Arima North Secondary School, Central Secondary School, sorry. Arima Central Secondary School amassed a total of 171 points, while Presentation College amassed a total of 248 points. So Presentation College is the winner of this round. Following this, we had St. Mary's College debating St. Augustine Girls High School. St. Augustine Girls High School got a total of 216 points, while St. Mary's College got a total of 248 points. So St. Mary's College was the winner of this round. And finally, we had St. Joseph's College, Port of Spain, debating Naparima College. St. Joseph's College got a total of 231 points, while Naparima College got a total of 253 points. It was close. So Naparima College will be going forward. Once again, we want to thank all of you for your participation, and for the 4 schools that are moving forward: Bishop's High School Tobago, Presentation College, St. Mary's College, and Naparima College. We will be meeting here again next week, Wednesday. We will provide details about the topic that you'll be debating before the end of this week, and we will give you any further details that are necessary for next week, Wednesday's semi-final round of the debate. So thank you once again, and we wish all of you a blessed rest of your day.